In a library in Dublin, there is a book that men once carried into battle. 58 leaves of vellum, stained and battered, about 1450 years old. The Psalms, in Latin. It is one of the oldest books Ireland possesses, and for 1,000 years it belonged to a single family, the O'Donnells of Donegal, who did not read it. They marched with it. Before a battle, a chosen man, sinless if one could be found, would carry the book 3 times around the assembled army, and the O'Donnells believed no force could break them while it went before. They gave the book a name, the way you'd name a sword. They called it the Cathach, the battler. A strange fate for a Psalter. But tradition says this book was born strange. It says these pages are a copy, made in secret at night by a borrowing guest who had not asked permission, that the quarrel over this copy went before a king, that the king's ruling led to a war, and the war to some 3,000 dead, and that the man whose pen did it, a prince, a poet, a monk of royal blood, accepted for his penance the heaviest sentence his world could imagine. Not death. Exile. Tonight, the white martyr himself. The story of Colm Cille, the man we call Columba. Welcome back to Sleepy Saints. Last time we read a forgotten page from Cambrai and learned the 3 colours of martyrdom: red for blood, green for penance, and white, parting for the sake of God from everything that you love. Tonight we follow the man who became the very portrait of that 3rd colour. As ever, there's nowhere to be and nothing to do. If sleep takes you somewhere in the Hebrides, the monks will row on without you. We begin in the hills of Donegal in the year 521. He was born by a small lake at Gartan in the northwest of Ireland, into the mightiest dynasty on the island, the Uí Néill, the descendants of Néill of the 9 hostages. His kindred made kings the way other families made ploughs. Had he wanted it, the men of the north might one day have made him one. Tradition gives him a birth name, Crimthan, the fox. It did not stick. The children near his foster home, the story goes, watched the boy come again and again from the little church where he prayed, and gave him the name Ireland remembers. Colm Cille, the dove of the church. A fox by birth, a dove by choice, his whole life is in that trade. In Ireland, noble children were sent away to be fostered. It was how the great families wove their alliances. But this boy was fostered unusually, not by a chieftain, but by a priest. He grew up amid psalms the way his cousins grew up amid cattle raids. And when the time came to choose the road to a kingship or the road to a cell, he walked into a monastery and took the vows. Understand what the world saw: a royal heir laying his sword hand on a copy desk. The first of his renunciations. It would not be the last. He learned his craft under the great teachers of the age, a monk named Finian above all. Remember that name, it returns. And then he began to build. At 24, tradition says, he founded his beloved monastery at Derry, the place of oaks. And he loved it so dearly that later poets swore he ordered no oak cut there. More houses followed, Durrow among them, another oak grove. And always, everywhere, books. He was a scribe the way other men are soldiers, psalter after psalter, gospel after gospel, by his own hand. Copying in that world was how light travelled. A book not copied was a candle with one wick. Which brings us to the borrowed psalter. Here the historian must open his palms and confess. What follows is tradition, written down in full centuries later, though the bones of it are old. But no telling of Columba's life has ever left it out, and neither will we. The story goes that his old master Finian returned from abroad with a treasure, a psalter of a new and better translation, Jerome's, rare as a jewel in Ireland. Columba asked to copy it. Finian, jealous of his treasure, refused. So Columba stayed behind in the church, night after night, and copied it in secret. The legend, never able to resist, adds that he needed no candle, that light streamed from the fingers of his left hand while the right one wrote. Finian found him out and claimed the copy, made from his book, in his house without leave. Columba refused to surrender it, and the dispute went where royal disputes went, to the High King Diarmait at Tara. The king heard both men, and then he gave the judgment that every Irish schoolchild once knew. The sentence tradition calls the first ruling on copying in the history of the world. To every cow belongs her calf. To every book, its copy. The copy belonged to Finian. It might have ended there, a proud man losing a lawsuit. But other griefs piled on. A young kinsman of Columba's, under his sacred protection, was seized and put to death at the king's order. Sanctuary violated, and now the Uí Néill of the north had two causes, and a psalter, and their blood was up. In the year 561, this part is no legend. The dry old annals record it. Two armies met beneath the bare mountain of Ben Bulben, at a place called Cúl Dreimhne. The king was broken, the north was victorious, and the tradition counts 3,000 men who did not walk home. 3,000. Over a book, said the tellers ever after, knowing surely that wars are never really over books, and telling it that way regardless, because that was the version with the truth in it. The copyist prince looked at a field beneath Ben Bulben and understood that his pride had helped fill it. A synod gathered and moved to cast him out of the church itself. Cooler heads reduced it, but the stain remained, and the counsel that reached him, tradition gives it to his soul friend, the hermit Molaise, had the terrible symmetry the Irish loved. Leave Ireland. Go and never look on her again. And win for Christ as many souls as fell at Cúl Dreimhne. And so we come to the scene where our last episode ended, but now you know the weight in the boat. The year 563, a curragh of hide and ash on the grey water, and in it 12 companions and a man of 42 who had been a prince of the Uí Néill. a founder of monasteries, a poet whose verses Ireland would keep for 1,000 years. Behind him, Derry of the Oaks, his kindred, his psalters, his name. Everything in the homily's exact and merciless word that he loved. White martyrdom is not a metaphor when the coastline is actually sinking behind you. They went north through the scattered islands to the sea kingdom of Dal Riata, where a king of Columba's own blood granted him a place to land, a small green island off the tip of Mull. 3 miles long, sand like crushed shell, pale glass water, wind. Iona. Tradition says, you'll remember, that he climbed a hill there, looked south, and couldn't see Ireland, and that he stayed for that very reason. The cairn on that hill still bears the name the back turned to Ireland. They built with what was there, a bank of earth around the enclosure, a little church of timber, huts of wattle, and then began the plain, magnificent rhythm that would hold on that island for centuries. The psalms by day and in the dark, barley in the Macaire fields, seals on the skerries, and in the writing hut, quills moving, because he had not stopped copying. He never stopped copying. The man exiled over a book spent his exile making books. Iona did not stay small. From that 3-mile island, daughter houses spread through the islands and the highlands, and in time its monks would carry the faith to the English of the north. The hermit's council was being kept, souls won for Christ, in numbers no one at Cúl Dreimhne could have counted. But Adomnán, his kinsman, who governed Iona a century later and wrote his life, keeps, among the miracles, some small moments that are worth all the rest. One day, he writes, Columba called a brother and told him, "In 3 days, at dawn, a crane will fall on the western shore, beaten by the winds on its long flight, exhausted. Lift it, carry it to shelter, feed it and tend it for 3 days until it is strong." The brother asked no questions. The bird came as foretold and was tended, and Columba gave the reason, and the reason is the whole man, because it comes from the land of our fathers. He could not go home. But when home came to him, storm-beaten, on borrowed wings, he fed it. The exile did not hide on his island. He went east, up the great glen, into the country of the Picts, to the fortress of their king, Bride, near the river Ness. Adomnán fills the journey with wonders, and one of them has had a stranger afterlife than any miracle in the book. At the river Ness, the travellers found local men burying a neighbour, killed, they said, by a beast in the water. Columba, unbothered, asked one of his monks to swim across and fetch a boat. The creature rose, and the old abbot raised his hand, made the sign of the cross, and gave a command that has the calm of a man ordering a dog off a couch. "Go no further. Do not touch the man. Go back at once." It went. The Picts were duly impressed, so 13 centuries later, were the newspapers, for that page of Adomnán is the earliest monster ever recorded in the waters of the Ness, the remote great-grandfather of every Nessie headline. The first Loch Ness monster story, it turns out, is a saint's life. Take that comfort to sleep with you. And here, honesty asks something of us. The legend says he vowed never to look on Ireland again. The record says otherwise. As abbot and statesman he did return, most famously to a great royal convention at Uí Néill, where tradition remembers him pleading for mercies, including the saving of Ireland's poets from banishment. Later storytellers, loving the vow too much to lose it, sent him there blindfolded, with Iona's turf strapped beneath his feet, so that his eyes and souls might keep the letter of it. Smile at the blindfold, then hear what the old tellers were protecting. White martyrdom was never a rule about geography. It is a direction of the heart. The exile may cross the sea 12 times. What he may not do is take back what he laid down. And Columba never took it back. 34 years, and his grave on Iona. June in the year 597. He is 76. Adomnán tells the last days as the community kept them hour by hour, like something laid up in lavender. The old abbot is driven in a cart to bless the barns, and is glad the brothers will have bread for the year. On the way back, he rests, and the white horse, the old pack horse that carried the milk vessels, comes to him, lays its head against his breast, and mourns. Adomnán insists, like a person, and the attendant moves to drive it off, and Columba stops him. Let him weep, he knows. That evening, in his hut, he is at his copy desk, of course he is, working on the Psalter, and he comes to the verse, "They that seek the Lord shall want no manner of thing that is good." And he sets down the pen and says, "Here at the end of the page I must stop. What follows, let by then write." When the bell rang for midnight prayer, he rose ahead of them all and went quickly to the church. And there, before the altar, in the arms of his weeping attendant, with his brothers crowding in with lamps, he raised his hand to bless them. And that was all. The 9th of June, 597. Here, at the end of the page, I must stop. A scribe's death for a scribe. The sentence finishes, the Psalter passes to other hands, the copying goes on. It has gone on. The battler sleeps in Dublin under glass, and the island he chose because he could not see home from it became for half of Europe a place people cross the sea to see. Next time, we go where even Columba's monks might have flinched, a fang of rock 7 miles out in the open Atlantic, and the brothers who built their beehive cells on top of it. But for tonight, no more sea. If sleep is near, let it come. And whatever field you left unfinished today, someone else's hand can write what follows. That is not defeat. That is how the light travels. Sleep well. God keep you, and may you wake in the place of your resurrection.